Hello, wonderful people. I am super excited to welcome you to another mind-blowing edition of PM Personality Profile. My guest tonight, he is Harvard-trained chartered accountant and politician. He is senior economist at the Fiscal Affairs Department of the International Monetary Fund. Ghana's former Minister of Finance, Emmanuel Seth Terkper, my guest tonight. So refreshing to see you. How have you been? It's been a while. What have you been up to?
Well, I do a few things. Currently, since leaving office, I do consulting in public financial management and tax, which is what I've done, which has an element, a heavy element of accounting. You said I was a chartered accountant.
Yeah.
Most people associate the government's fiscal framework, with, public policy, economics, macroeconomy, macro fiscal, all those expressions. But
those technical words.
Yes. Macro fiscal, to the layman, we can say is the budget.
Okay.
Yes, we say it's the budget. So we can say most people associate the work of economists, to the budget, and then to, of course, the banking sector. We have the central bank in particular. But behind all of this is accounting, just as behind producers like yourself, presenters and producers. You have the back office.
Definitely.
The people who take care of the revenue you generate with adverts and the rest. So that's what I've been doing. So we have a small consultancy called PFM, Public Financial Management, stroke tax, Africa. Our focus is on Africa, and in particular, the African countries that have become middle income countries, like Ghana. We became middle income countries some time ago. Secondly, I do some teaching. I teach level 3, 4, mainly level 4, and then graduates, students at the University of Ghana Business School. I do adjuncts for a friend who is a Gimpa, and once in a while I do similar thing outside the country. I haven't done much of that outside recently, but I have taught in occasional lecture, as they say. That's you are invited by a lecturer to come in Duke University, Harvard. When Dr. Bochu was there, blessed memory now. I used to leave the IMF and then go and do some teaching in his class. So I've always taught. I've taught since I left Kivas, obviously. So you see where the love of teaching came from.
Once a teacher, always a teacher. Let's start with our economy. All of us have been worried about the challenges we've had over the past period, and the fact that government says because we're having challenges, they've had to increase taxes and other taxes that we even call nuisance taxes. For instance, VAT, we're told, is being increased from 12.5% to 15%, so that they're adding 2.5 to it, which many are also struggling to understand because we know what that comes with. I mean, what went wrong? Why are we here?
Ghana went through a major transition from when we declared HIPC. It ended an era. It ended the era we used to call the Economic Recovery Program or Structural Adjustment Program era, associated with names like J.J. Rawlings, Dr. Bochu. On the technical side, you had names like Dr. Abe, and then Professor Mills before he became Vice President as Commissioner, the late Salome and the late Misata. So that was a major phase one, which took the economy out of a major crisis in the 70s and early 80s. So ERP-SAP, was a phase, major post-independence correction phase.
Okay.
So we did a correction until the constitutional rule, party politics and others came in. Many believe that expenditure exploded. The expenditure under control was exploded with, on both sides, both political parties when they came to power. That ran through the 90s. Then our debt became burdensome and we declared HIPIC. We had borrowing space and then we started borrowing again. Up to by the time His Excellency Kufuor was leaving office, our debt was becoming unsustainable. But two things happened at that point in time. We discovered oil, or three. We discovered oil. We rebased the GDP. When you say rebase the GDP, people wonder. Our economy was dominated by agric. And so when you are measuring output, you give a heavy weight, to agric. But when you discover, first it was the services sector that started building up very fast. The banking sector, we saw, the external banks, Barclays and others, grow fast. Then the Nigerian banks came in. Then Ghanaian banks also came in. Construction boom, came in. So it was clear that agric was no longer the dominant economy. Then we discovered oil. So at that point we decided to give different weights, because if agric constituted 50% of the economy, it had to, now it is probably construction or services put together. That is the 50%, not agric. Okay. And then the third thing, we discovered oil. And the combination of this is that the space from HIPIC, which encouraged spending again, the rebasing to recognize the change in the economy, but more importantly, oil made Ghana a middle income country. Okay. In fact, if you look at Agenda 2020, back in the Rawlings era, we were to become middle income country by 2020, which is 3 years ago. Yeah. If you look at its change to Agenda 2015, and I said we were to become middle income in 2015. Okay. But by 2010, 10 years ahead of the schedule, we had become middle income. Okay. Virtually unprepared. Because when you become middle income, and this is very important, you start losing, relatively cheap financing for your expenditure. And so we went into the sovereign bond market. Exactly. So you are not weaned off completely, to use the expression, but you have to know that your borrowing is becoming more and more, expensive. Put it that way. We started issuing our own bonds. We started going to the sovereign bond market, and what we were doing was substituting those sorts of money for financing development and for expenditure. Very tricky. Substituting them with the World Bank, IMF, African Development Bank, relatively cheaper, what we call concessional financing, and grants from our development partners. Luckily for us, we recognize this and put in the PRMA, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, because you remember the debates, some of you were involved, that we don't want to do with oil what we did for gold, what we did for cocoa, diamond, and the rest. So we put a framework in place. And that framework, said oil is new, let us use it to tackle the areas where the economy has been suffering. Borrowing without having a means of payment, was a big one. That's where we are now. We've borrowed HIPIC, we went HIPIC. Okay, then we're moving, so just before oil, so we said this thing is getting tricky. Okay, so we started put some of the oil money aside so that when we borrow, we can use it to be paying down, so that we can balance things. And then because we are commodity exporters, when the demand for crude oil now, gold, cocoa falls because of demand in outside the country, then it goes down with our economy.
Right.
Less reserves and then less revenue. That explains the stabilization fund. These were doing well, but in the last few years they started to crumble. But we continued with our expensive, borrowing to the point where we are today, and we cannot pay our debts. But because we have become middle income and no longer a low income or developing country, it means nobody will forgive your debts. So we are now being asked to go and sit down, with our creditors or those who gave us a loan and negotiate a means of paying, no forgiveness. But if you can talk to them and they can stretch it out. And that is because the IMF, World Bank, and others who normally come to our aid, by their articles, their formation, the rules that lead them to they cannot give money to countries that they know have debt and is unsustainable. Because underlying the help is a loan that they are going to give us. So they are only going to add to. So I hope, in brief, this is,
our situation.
And what happened is that because of also the pressure for elections and the rest, our expenditure promises were becoming larger and larger and larger. With a lot of free things, when in actual fact we were both using expensive loans, no longer the cheap, loans, and the revenue also did not become too buoyant for us, and so it worsened, the situation.
Will it make any difference if we go to IMF? You've been there before, so you can better explain.
Yes, but I also started my career actually in the Ministry of Finance at the time we were doing ERP SAP, and worked with, some personalities. Maybe later we can talk about them.
About that, the Professor Boche Touch,
and
all of
and
that.
Then yes, for me also is Mr. Tua Hoy, and all those. All of them.
Okay.
Listen on me. But I work more closely with Mr. Tua Hoy, Professor Morris, and and others. Okay. I said we have a couple more steps, to take. But if we go back to the 70s, going to the early 80s, before the PNDC approached the IMF, we used to have positive growth, negative growth, positive growth, negative growth. The first one is what I mentioned. The first reason, your commodity prices fall, and therefore it goes down with the economy. Yeah. The second, main reason is that when the commodities prices go up, we don't save enough, so that when it goes down, we can balance. Yeah. Yes. So the outcome of that was we were moving from positive growth, negative growth, positive growth, negative growth. So the oscillation, as they called it, was just going. The one thing which our 17 IMF programs, and people don't talk about the positive aspects. Well, you mentioned that I worked in the fund, so in the interest of disclosure, yes, I did. But with hindsight, we should recognize that the one thing that the 17 or 18 IMF programs, 18 if you add the COVID loan, it was an IMF program, only it has less conditionalities, is that it helps us to do corrections. You see, when you go into an IMF program, like today, what we are talking about, your debt is bad. Your debt, is unsustainable. It was forgiven once, now, as I said, it can't be forgiven. So, go and correct it. Your expenditure is too high. Go and correct it. You are not raising enough revenue. Go and correct it. So, throughout these 17 programs, these were the three unique things that were happening. In addition to, and when you touch expenditure, you are controlling expenditure in health, in education, energy, roads, everything, because that is what's your expenditure. But then with PAMSCAD, we realized that IMF programs were severe on the soft economy, where most people, education, health, and the rest. So what PAMSCAD brought was what we call social intervention. element into the program.
Okay.
Now, from 1983, between 1983-84, when our growth went up, it never went into negative until we came close with COVID, when we did a 0.8. So there was a correction mechanism, within the fund programs around the areas where I've mentioned. So you see, when you raise revenue, because that's why you have what you call prior actions and then performance criteria and an IMF program.
Okay.
So before they release the next tranche of money for you, you have sat with them and you are saying, I'm going to increase revenue from 12.5 to 13%. And I'm going to cut expenditure, maybe by 0.5 or 1%. If you don't achieve it, you have to go to the board to get a waiver and to promise that you achieve it before the next tranche will come. So like the COVID loan where we got all the money at once.
Yeah.
Every IMF program has come with tranches, or percentages of what is due to us.
Okay.
So if you take the 3 billion, compare the 3 billion with the COVID 1 billion, 3 billion we are talking about the COVID 1, you are not going to get the 3 billion at once. They may give you maybe upfront 1 billion because of the conditions, but you have to, in quote, sweat to get the remainder, which will be released in, say, 500 million, say, every quarter. And that is what we call the review, right? So what I was talking about is that the reason, we appear to have weathered the storm, with even external crisis, like the global financial crisis, and we were doing these corrections. And that was what we tried to put the measures together in what was then the homegrown policy to domesticate it, to use the expression, to domesticate it, so that, yes. And I can say with reasonable, certainty that it worked for a while. And let me give you just 2 or 3 examples. We took the first sovereign bond in 2007. We were paying only interest. Okay? By 2014, that bond was 3 years away. And because we were paying interest only, we would have had to cough $750 million on maturity date, October 4th, 2017. So with the PRMA and whatever, we set up the sinking fund. And before we left office in 2016, we used our own oil revenue to pay down $350 million US dollars, which means we reduce the 750, minus 350 to about 400 million. Then we use another 150 to 200 million of the 2015 bond, which we also used to do some restructuring, to push it out, into another 10 years, but this time with the sinking fund underneath to be paying, together with the new bonds that we were also issuing. The remainder, there was 250 million left, which was to be used in 2017. The current government used it to pay the balance of the 200 million that was left on the sovereign bond. That is the achievement I'm talking about. That was the first time ever that the country, yes, we pay loans from our resources, but that was the first time a big interest only loan was paid from our resources. Then we started putting some money aside also for stabilization to cut this thing, this interview a bit short. When COVID struck, first when the Kwame Nkrumah disaster struck, the first resources that were released before the development partners and others came in was about $50 million US from the stabilization fund. Because we were putting money in it, when COVID struck, we were able to take $250 million US. If you remember, it went to Parliament, right? Now we've gone back into bad habits. Despite 3 oil fields from 2017, these 2 funds are almost zero because we have rechanneled them again into consumption. You can say you've been using, exactly. And so when COVID struck, we found And the association said that, God forbid, if other global events should strike, or if Ukraine war, continue, we may be found wanting because we've depleted this. So we need to, apart from, tightening our belts, to, as we used to do with the 17 programs, I think we should all realize by now that these, what you call buffers, a buffer to help you when you are, and then debt repayment mechanisms are the things that stabilize the economy for many countries. And we should go back to be faithful to the PRMA in the medium to short term when we stabilize the economy again. I am hopeful. We have the experience. Both parties have had people who have done one or the other of these, 17, programs. Some of the old generation are passing. But I think that, with hard work, we shouldn't just take it for granted, because this time we have to renegotiate domestic debts. You can see even the objections coming from the domestic debts. But if we surmount this, then that's the point I'm making. This is the first prior action, an action prior to the IMF approving your program.
Okay.
So we were a bit ahead of ourselves when we said we had reached a staff level agreement. It was a conditional one.
It's quite interesting and quite deep, explaining this to the layman to actually understand where we've come from and where we are right now. But I also know that you played a critical role in the introduction of VAT in this country, the value-added tax. Let's talk about your role.
I was working in the ministry from 1986 to 1993, and I had just come back from doing my postgraduate. You mentioned Harvard. Then one fine afternoon, Mr. Misata comes around and he says that we are going to introduce VAT. I knew about VAT already and did a course in Harvard on VAT. So my superiors knew that. So at that relatively young age, I was thrust with the responsibility of something called a VAT National Coordinator.
Okay.
So from 1993 to 1995, we set up what we call the project management team, because you need 2 years to prepare. We all know about Kumit-Peku. The VAT was introduced in 1995, was cancelled, and then reintroduced. So the project team, which became a VAT service with additional staff, was where the role I played at the time the VAT was cancelled. Then when the VAT was reintroduced, I was given the same responsibility again, but a more senior and experienced, person on the administrative side, because we needed to do things together with Mr. Blankson and the gentleman, Mr. Zaglo, who left, the country. We continued to be the core of the project. Mr. Blankson, the one who became GRA Commissioner General.
Yeah.
So we continued, but we worked under Mr. E.F. Asamoah, who passed away, I believe, last year or so. And so we worked to reintroduce, the VAT. VAT was a major overhaul of our tax system, because we had about 15 separate service taxes. In fact, DSTV had just come, so we had DSTV, Settle, and Melcom. So it's not Melcom. Settle and what became MTN. Came on stream. Tigo and all those space phone, and that technology was coming. So with every new technology that comes, we put a service tax on it. And then custom by IRS, and customs was collecting what we call the sales tax, on goods. So we had two regimes. What VAT did, and in many countries, in fact, within a decade, about over 100 countries, changed their sales and service tax system to VAT, was that it had a number of rules, but let me just point to about 3 of them. First, it says a VAT will be introduced on all consumption expenditure. That is any goods where you go and buy at the final consumption stage, unless it is exempted. So it was more flexible. So immediately something comes out, housing, you know, okay, those were tough in the banking sector and all those. So the automatically they may be new to the economy, oil, whatever. You know, the law does not exempt them. So unless you go and exempt them, automatically they come into the VAT base.
Yeah.
So it became a uniform way of taxing consumption expenditure.
Okay.
That's a major, you know, attribute, you know, of the VAT. Now VAT also changed the method. So it says that when businesses pay the tax on a product which is going to be an input, they must keep the receipt. So that when they sell, because they are not consumers, they must deduct the tax that they paid from the tax that they are collecting until it gets to the, you know, the consumer. So every businessman in the middle, it can be 20 businessmen. For as long as the good commodity has not reached, you know, the consumer, they will be given what you call credit or refund for the tax that they paid. Credit, they take a credit and they pay the difference. So if your input is 10 and the tax on your input is 10 and you collect 15, right, the 10 has been collected already and paid to GRA, so you deduct the 10 from the 15 and you pay only 5. That's the name. You have added value, so it's a value added tax. It's a tax on only the value that you've added as a businessman. So what does that do? It means that businessmen, unless they see an opportunity in the market, they don't have to see you know, it to cost. To impose a tax on tax again, because you've taken it back as credit or as a refund. Okay, so that's the beauty of it. Of course, after Kumi Preku, you know, and all those things, we introduced it quite smoothly. But to be able to increase, you know, it was to be introduced as 15%. Because of Kumi Preku, it was introduced at 10%. So to be able to increase it and convince the population, MPs and ever, that this is not money that's going to be wasted, but it's going to be used for something, you know, useful. The 2.5% was dedicated to education. Under the Jerry administration. And then when His Excellency Kufuor's administration also came, they also increased it by 2.5%, and they dedicated it to health. You know, national health insurance. But they were collected as though they were VAT. So businessmen got their credit and businessmen got, you know, their refund, especially for exporters, because when you export, the rate is 0. Now the last developments, in 2018, the GET fund and the NHIL were removed from the VAT base, called straight levies, and the refund and the credit was denied to business. And then we were told the VAT was 12.5%. Of course, they started adding. So if you talk about inflation and other, these are also part of it. Because you are denying them their refund and their credit, they will add it to cost.
To the consumer.
To the consumer. So that's where the second debate also comes in. Is the VAT increase of 2.5%? Is it really an increase from 12.5% to 15%? Or if you were to go through the construct and the narrative, which I've been pointing out, then in all, you know, in substance, the NHIL and the GET fund continue to be, you know, VAT. You know, with a denial, like exemption of the. So in actual fact, the rate increase. That's why, you know, so exactly the rate increases from 17.5%. You know, to 20%.
To 20%.
For as long as you have not removed, you know, GET fund. Exactly.
Let's talk about your experience at the finance ministry. I mean, the late Professor Boche, may his soul rest in peace. You've spoken about how Professor Mills, the Ahoys impacted your life. I mean, what was the influence that they had in your life? In
one word, I would say it's insight. into public financial management,
Okay.
into how the budget is framed, what goes into it, the policies underlying them, and those type of things. But they also influenced me in their hard work. These were people who really worked, very hard those days, had, the zeal to see the country, pull out of, its situation. And I worked in a very small unit called the National Revenue Secretariat under the Ministry of Finance, under Mr. Ato Ahoy and Mr. Labissian, both of whom, Mr. Labissian happened to have been my chief executive when I did my national service at the procurement agency. And to go a bit personal, my manager was one Mrs. Adoma Battles Kujo, who after national service, because we were not going to be employed, held my arms and were recruiting at customs and IRS. They had been taken from the civil service, Professor Mills and others. And we walked straight into an office and to just cut the whole narrative short. Knock on the door, we entered, and here was Mr. Ahoy sitting there. And said, I brought you this gentleman, he needs a job. Actually, there were three of us, but I went first, who did the national service, and we all ended up in IRS, but that was kept in National Revenue Secretariat. And the strength of the whole staff was 19, supervising customs and IRS at the time. So it tells you that you have to really. And when I say 19, I mean from driver to the minister.
Wow, 19.
And you had to do.
Interesting.
Yes. So, and because I also had the good fortune, not misfortune, of completing my ICA Ghana qualification when I was working there, the last part. I was exempted because of my Bachelor of Commerce degree from the intermediate. So I did the first two, the remaining 3 parts at the professional. I did the 2 when I was in procurement agency. I was thinking about going to the accounting field, and then I finished the 3rd part. And because of that, I was also asked to join an expenditure committee under the 2 deputies, the late Senome and Bakwisi, in Misata. And so I began to see my accounting in play, and I was drafted to join what we call OMO today, when it was being restructured and everything. So I began to attend meetings at the central bank, with some of the colleagues, who became, commissioners, Dr. Wampa, in fact, Dr. Addison and others, who were the people who were then, some were slightly ahead of me, some were contemporaries. Mr. Na was my classmate and other. So you see the crop of not just politicians, but public servants who were also immersed into that. So I owe my good fortune to that, and being fortunate, to be picked for a postgraduate education. And then after the VAT was introduced, VAT was so popular that I was poached, more or less, and I joined the IMF, and then worked with them for about 10 years until one of my bosses, Professor Mills, asked me to come back and be deputy minister. So that is what it means to have, worked with these people. And in fact, let me mention that when the VAT was going to be reintroduced, Professor Mills had become vice president from being commissioner. So I worked and he was charged with the responsibility of reintroducing the VAT, and so I worked quite closely, with him back then.
But at the IMF, you worked at the Fiscal Affairs Department. Aside that, you also worked at the, you helped in other units like the African and Legal Department, the Caribbean Technical Assistance Center, and many other units. I mean, what were your contributions to all of these?
In the fund, you can be sure that once or twice every month you are on the plane going to one country or the other.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, people say that, especially when you work in a place like the Caribbean, it's like you see all these exotic things that people think that, but you hardly have time because the missions are usually 2 weeks.
Okay.
You know, so you arrive weekend, jet lag or no jet lag, Monday morning, you're on your way to have a meeting with the minister. And the discipline of the fund is that you must finish your report, final draft report, in the field, and send it to headquarters. You know, for validation 2 to 3 days ahead before you meet the minister to present it. So that itself involves also, you know, very, you know, hard work, and especially when you become a mission chief, as I was fortunate to have become before I left, you have to put the work of about 3 minimum, 4, 5. Sometimes you are joined by the World Bank.
Wow.
You know, or we join World Bank missions. And even though you are in the fiscal affairs department, the ones that go to the country are the area departments, in our case, Africa department. But because you are a fiscal expert, you accompany them. So the second thing which I would say I gained significantly from the fund is exposure in working in different places. For example, I worked from countries, that goes back to even HID, countries that were in the former Soviet Union and were seeking to join the EU, and you had to meet certain conditions before you can join. So it's some of those exposure and others. I talk about buffers, I talk about, you know, were things which one came back with and convinced my bosses, including GM, you know, His Excellency John Mahama, you know, about we becoming middle income and introducing some of these things. By the way, I think I need to mention this, that when the VAT was going to be reintroduced, there was, because the issue was whether we had done enough publicity, enough education, or the rest. So the VAT board, later when it was established, was chaired by, you know, Honorable Minister then Communications, Spio-Garbrah. But the one who led the publicity, who led, you know, the re-strategizing to reintroduce the VAT from a PR and other perspective was one John Mahama, Deputy Minister.
At that time.
At that time, yes.
Quite interesting. And I know that your experience at IMF also helped you, because I know you consulted for the Harvard Institute for International Development, the Harvard International Tax Program, the African Development Bank, the UN Committee of Tax Experts. I mean, you were also correspondent of tax analysts in the US. What was the take home from all of these?
Well, to start with, you know, Harvard, they select a group of, you know, potential masters students. They encouraged to do their PhD, you know, either to stay to become professors, or they introduce consulting. That's what Harvard Institute for International Development was. And so, in one class, we had a guest lecturer called Chad Licho, who was doing missions to Ghana. So he was the one who came, you know, and taught, you know, the class that day. And immediately he entered, he said, "Oh, Seth, so you are here?" I said, "Yes." And so that explains when I came back home, because it was a VAT class that I was asked to. I knew the VAT was going to be introduced. But then because I was involved in the ERP SAP, I stayed for about 6 months, which my visa permitted. And so I was drafted into this group of young people who work with Jeff Sachs, you know, and others who were going to Eastern Europe. So I joined, and I had my first, you know, flair of consulting, you know, with them. And then I did some research work. But then I decided to come back home because I was bonded and I felt I should come back. And by then the scholarships for master students were in the civil service, you know, were dwindling because people went in and never came back, you know. So I came back home, and that is a vast story. Then the IMF came on board, you know, because I met them on the consulting, and they asked me if I could do some part-time and things with them. I spoke to my bosses, And they said, why not? So I had a lot of leave, so I would take my leave, you know, accumulated for a week or two, join them, you know. And so before I joined the fund, actually, I was consulting with them. I remember very well going into post-war Sierra Leone, Liberia, you know, and the rest, you know, before I joined them. So again, is the insight that those things gave me. The international program was actually part of the MPA for which focus on tax.
Yeah.
You know, so I did that course. You know, together with other Ghanaians and Africans.
Were you not scared going to countries like Liberia, Sierra Leone? I mean, they were war-torn countries.
I went to Afghanistan, if you want to know.
Oh my goodness! How was the experience?
Where we go under the auspices of the UN. Everybody who works in the fund goes under the auspices of the UN. So you are quasi, you go with the laissez-passer. So you are quasi-diplomat, not a full diplomat. But you have a diplomatic access and everything. Then the fund and the bank offices there make sure that you are protected. So in Afghanistan, for example, you move in bulletproof cars and the rest, and you hardly stray, you know, out in the rest. But then you just have to be careful. And usually when you go to war-torn countries, from a safe hotel, you are driven to the office. If they tell you a place is not safe, you don't go.
You don't go there.
Yeah, you don't go there.
You've seen a lot, you've seen it all, maybe I should put it that way. While growing up, did it ever cross your mind that one day you'll become a politician?
No, but I moved with politicians.
Even at your young age?
Yeah, because most of the people we looked up to, you know, in Somania, where I was born and grew up, you know, were on the left, you know, left of center of politics. And they were key. We had a students association, students union. And not just those on the left, but those on the right. And so they were also like our late paramount chief, Iti Odonko, who was, and then the two men, who was a banker in his own right, and you know, a businessman like Henry Jabba, you know, known to be Otiko's, you know, father. You know, known to be on the right, Honorable Boade, Kwashi and the rest. We looked up to them, and especially the closest I came to politics early was I was in the Philip Ghana, you know, Nooks as a local rep. And then I was a student and youth task force leader during the Rollins, you know, when students took the mantle, you know, in my area, which was quite an experience. So you had friends.
Part of those who stayed at home for a year?
Yes, I was part of. I stayed at home for 1 year. Yes. So that explains why my education was from 79 to 84, not 23. So yes, so I was. But again, we organized ourselves, students union, and we taught, you know, part-time, charge a little money from secondary schools. And so it's in the teaching office. You know, come in. Yeah, so that I would say that from a young age, that is I would say the closest. But I was more active in the Presbyterian Church. I grew in a Salem, or what you call a label, like Salem, which is a missionary area. You know, where the pastor and everybody lived, the early converts, you know, lived. You know, and my family had something to do with giving part of the land, you know, for that. So we were right there. So I was in the choir very early. Then went to a boys' school, and my voice cracked because I was forced to to sing treble.
You would definitely sing for me. So
the voice is cracked already. So well, for the voice is cracked, so I don't have to sing. But I became more active in the YPG. The national treasurer, and I was also treasurer for the largest presbytery, you know, by wealth and to some extent size, the Ghana Presbytery. You know, so I started managing cash from the church.
Oh, that explains it. Emmanuel Seth Terkper, he is the former finance minister. You know, one thing about him, people see him, including myself, see him as an Ewe. The interesting thing is that when you greet him in Ewe, he will respond. And when you also greet him and say, Ongesaminya, he would respond to that as well. When I return from this break, he'll be telling us all about where he hails from. He gave us a clue. He was born in Somenya. How was life in Somenya? Plus, he's being a finance minister. You know the pressure that comes with that sensitive position. He'll be telling us all about it. Was it a time that he ever regretted becoming a finance minister? All of that after this break. Please stay with me. Welcome back to PM Personality Profile. My guest is Emmanuel Seth Terkper. He is former finance minister. Let me ask you, which part of the country do you hail from?
I come from the Eastern region.
Not the Volta region?
No, not the Volta region. So I attended school in Ho. But for my primary through middle, back then middle school, or GSS now, everything was in Somalia.
Okay.
So I attended Presby kindergarten, belonging to the church there.
But both parents are from Somanya?
Not really, but I grew up, with a single mom, so
okay.
By the time we were growing up, it was, our mom.
Okay, so it's your mom who is from Somanya?
Yes, so I attended primary schools in Somanya. Did the common entrance, twice. Not because I failed, but because in Form 2, which is one of the biggest disappointments for me, but I passed pre-sec and I couldn't go. So as a Presby boy who passes pre-sec and couldn't go.
What happened?
Well, the reason is quite simple. My grandparents and parents were cocoa farmers.
Okay.
Well, I say cocoa farmers. We're a cocoa farming family from the eastern region to central,
okay.
To Wasa, Akopon, where so we have a large cocoa community. But that was the year the cocoa farms burnt. So it's a simple there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that actually.
Yeah. So it's preempted, my going. My cousins were in Ho Technical, so I was persuaded to go to a business school, because of that. If you can continue, at least you can have something to do, tapping or something, okay. So I went to Ho Technical, did business, but I had 3 wonderful teachers. The head of departments, Mr. Bacha, one of Nigerian descent, Mr. Tafa, and Mr. Kujo, who is still, I'm still in touch with him. Okay. They convinced me to do we were doing RS, the Royal Society of Arts, but they convinced me to do the O-level as a private student, which I did. Bought some books on government and general paper. I got Accra Poly and New Japan. I opted for Accra Poly. And then there I met another wonderful teacher. He looked at all that I've done. Then he said, Mr. Jakwa, he said, well, you have to continue and do the A-levels.
Okay.
So again, general paper with government, So leaving Poly, I did the DBS. That's the Diploma in Business Studies, RS63. And then A-levels.
Okay.
And so even though I got both Legon and Kivas, I decided to go to Kivas to do the Bachelor of Commerce. Okay. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. We'll talk about
so that's the line of my education
on university campus. But let's
talk about a lot of people think I'm heavy a lot, even this morning. And one of my regrets, I was in a boarding house of yours, but if I stayed in town, you know, I wish I were in town and could speak heavy. Then there will be no need to just respond to the greeting and then courteously tell somebody, oh, I'm Krobo, I'm not heavy, because it's difficult to continue with the with the conversation as it happened even just this morning.
Yes.
So, but I mean that's the what it is.
But once I say Ungesaminya, that's one you can respond because it's your mother tongue, right?
That I can respond.
So how do you?
But
respond? How do you respond?
Oh,
to
you
that?
only respond A. Yes, I am.
But A, you know, A is also in Ewe.
Exactly. But you know, if you look at the migration, it was the Krobos are in the eastern region.
Okay.
But we are the other part of the Dangbe.
Yes.
You know, so when you talk about Dangbe,
yeah.
And you also know that the migration, which is believed to come from somewhere in the Middle East through Nigeria, was the Dangmes and the Ewes. Okay. And settling in the same area. And so you have the advanced Negos, you know, the Krobos. Okay. So you see that they are together, shy. Yes. Yeah. But we happened, you know, because we happened to be the farmers, went up the mountains and the rest. And so when the eastern region was being drawn, so we ended up.
But I know that how you greet an elderly person is not the same.
I was just going to warn you that
you greet a younger person.
Yes, I was just going to warn you that you don't meet an elderly person
and go
and say
Ungesaminya.
No.
You may receive a slap.
Well, this is a laugh. They will know that, especially your accent, you know, and the way you say it, they will let you know.
They will know.
Yes, but we have the courtesy of, you know, begging for the greeting. So you say, Modewo. Hello, Modewo. If you are mainly Modewo, if you are known, Modemi.
Modemi.
Exactly.
And
then he would ask you, Ungesaminya.
Okay, yes. Then I can see.
But when I meet my...
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about growing up in Somanya. Must have been fun.
Yes, it was. Somanya is cosmopolitan for the simple reason that many of the workers who worked in, first of all, it was on the trade route. You know, the Krobos were the Krobo Mountains, close to Akuse.
Yes.
So it was on the trade route, the old trade route. Akuse was one of the major trade routes. So they decided the mountains, you know, and they were farmers. And, you know, so very entrepreneurial in terms of farming. And then the other aspect of this is that the Krobos moved from the mountains under Governor Graces, and they settled, you know, in the valleys. But it was cosmopolitan and fun because, for some reason, most of the workers who work in VRA, they then Asuchari factory, Japan textiles, you know, and there was one more, Akosomo textiles.
Yes.
Majority of them lived in Somanya.
Oh.
And so, and then we also have a very, very old zone, you know, moving from Akuse into, and then Ada, you know, influence.
Okay.
But you had people coming from particularly other parts of the eastern region. You know, Akwapim, you know, of course, ATL is already in Akwamu.
Yes.
You know, and then, yes. So Somanya became, you know, the hub of a lot of commercial and other businesses. And then you move and then you go to Dumase and you have Agomanya, the second hub. Then, of course, if you drive through Bong, then you know the other hub. You have to stop, You have to stop for the human traffic.
Okay.
I mean, Bong, where you buy your adodi and things.
Yes.
So you see these are the three. And then up you have Asisawa, you know, also being another major you know, market.
Yes.
So the Krobos are either Yilos or the Amanyas. You know, we are two, and we have two paramours. But we are one Krobo.
Okay.
But during holidays, one of our hobbies was to go and catch sugarcane. You can be lucky to be rebagging sugar.
Okay.
Or doing something in any of the factories, holiday job, or you be in the plantations cutting sugar, sugar cane,
your
and
grandparents were cocoa farmers.
Yes, we did.
That you were sort of another bee.
No.
There was a lot of money at home.
No, my grandfather is reputed to have said that his grandchildren, they were in the western region. The grandchildren should be in Somalia and attend school. Because they had to stop his children to join the farm and other things.
Yeah.
But every holiday, you took the vehicle, those days, to Accra, and you took the blue train to Huni Valley, and then down to, the Wassa, and you walk, and that's where you spend your holidays, on the cocoa farm.
Okay.
Cassava farm and other.
Okay.
Yes, so it wasn't, you were part of it.
Okay.
So you are taught to break the pot, you are taught to dry it. At younger ages, we were just at home looking at the weather, and stirring the beans so that the sun, you see, it's very dense rainforest. So you rush to cover when you see drizzling or something because it doesn't do.
Yeah.
So no, it wasn't so rosy. My grandparents made sure
back in Somanya, you had to also.
Well, after the cocoa farms, that's when secondary school and the rest we often stayed, to do some, because it takes about 3 to 5 years, even with the new crop.
Okay.
So whilst they were doing many of those, our senior brothers, some of them went, but we decided to just stay with our friends, and early morning you are on the farm or in the factory, you work, and then you make some living.
Okay.
Yes. The other side, which was fun, then was, I don't know if you may have heard of Acotex.
Acotex.
Yes, and then the factory club, yeah.
Okay.
So most of their support came from Somalia, and the stadium was in Somalia.
Okay.
And so we played, cutting razors, courts, those days. So you saw every match, those days. The big names, come and, Razak and all those, Ibrahim Tanku. You saw all of them.
You saw all of them live.
Yes,
live
so,
and colored.
Yeah, so you play your course very well, so you can be at the stadium playing cutting razor. After that, then we became the ball boys and we watched all the matches. And so that time was really a go with. Yes.
I can imagine. But was there also challenging moments or terrible moments that even at this age you still remember?
We lost our mom very young, so we have two mothers. So my auntie just took over.
Okay.
And I think we need to be talking about as a compliment.
Oh,
so,
definitely.
Yes. So the same thing with stepmoms and things who step up and do a lot of things. Yeah. So that was a moment which I remember vividly.
At what age?
I was in primary 4 going to 5.
Wow.
And then I had 2 younger siblings.
Wow.
But she stepped in, and at that age maybe it helped also. Because your mind is not so mature to be focused. Yeah. We remember the happy moments, but she was the lovely auntie already anyway.
Okay.
She sold clothes, and so so we got some goodies already. So it was a transition that that moved on.
But definitely, is there a point? I mean, even at this age, do you still remember? Sometimes you miss your mother.
I miss my second mom.
Yes.
You lost my auntie.
You
Yes.
lost her as well.
No, as well. It was in mid-90s. At the time we were doing the VAT.
At that time, you were already an adult.
Yes, but that was also vivid.
Okay.
Because she had been sick, we sometimes bring her to Accra. Treatment. Yes, and it was vivid because I remember sitting with we were then drafting the reintroduction of the VAT. So we were drafting the law, and we were providing the technical input for the Attorney General staff.
Right.
And there was a nice lady who, Mrs. Ofolubuati. And so I was sitting across as coordinator, and then my brother came in, and they said my brother wanted to see me. So I said, so she told them, I said, oh, we should wait, So he went to the ministry first, finance, then came, was told I was. And I said, they said, oh, you needed to. So he wrote an urgent, and it was just 3 words. Mom is dead.
Oops.
That was shocking. And so Mr. Fulbuatin could sense that there was something wrong.
A blow.
Goodness. So she took the note, read it, and so she kept me in the office, gave me some down, and and I had to rally my younger, so that was so vivid, because but the positive thing is that she lived to see me as a chartered accountant, not other things for which she had told. Because even though she was relatively, by market standards, doing well, selling cloth, had a GNTC passbook and that kind of thing. Her trade was also hit hard, by the 70s Kalabuli and the rest.
Okay.
So that also came down.
Okay.
And so it added to the struggle. That was also around the time the cocoa, so one would have wished, but I mean, it was doing that. So she lived to see a bit more.
So as of now, you still miss her sometimes?
Yes, that's what we do.
You do?
Yeah.
Have you shed some tears before? I mean, just sit in one corner and remember one of the things that, she lived for. And
well, the good thing about growing, those days in Salem and others is you had everybody in the community being a parent, that kind of thing. And so, yes, once in a while you remember, but this I like to remember her for the good things, the sacrifice and
she made for you.
And especially when you have to make this sacrifice with a relatively better education and all that, then you get to understand, the extreme sacrifice,
Wow. Wow. She must have been there for you guys.
Yeah, indeed, she was.
How many siblings?
2 others. So we are 3. 3 boys.
3 boys, no girl.
Oh, we never regret, not in a positive sense, because you see we grew up calling our cousins sister. I remember what I said. My grandfather deciding that yes. So we had uncles and we all grew up in the same house in Somanya.
Okay.
And so we had all these sisters
no
around.
lack.
There were so many. So many.
Anything.
They were like sisters. We were brought up to. So we didn't really. I miss that much. Very much.
So O level, A level. Where was that? You said in Ho?
No, O level Ho, and then A level DBS.
Okay.
Those combination was at Accra Polytechnic.
Accra Polytechnic. Yes. Okay.
But in Form 2, it hit me really hard, because back then we were only 2 who passed PSEC from the town. And my senior who was in Form 3, he left, he went. Dr. Mwate, he became an atomic engineer, very, very, brilliant. But then I had colleagues who went to Ghanata, other places, but not to have. It was the idea for us because PSEC was from Odumase, and before he went to Legon.
Yes.
So one had, dreams of a science college and that kind of thing. So that really hit hard. But as I said, once others started to step in, they encourage you that look, it's still opportunity. You have something, and this is something I like to just again pass on. Maybe if I have a message for the youth, some setbacks, you never know where they're going to, to lead you. So don't let you demoralize so much as to, take into drinking, to all those kind of things, and you rather probably will be missing, a bigger, opportunity. Yeah, because at that age, I come to realize that yeah, you had your ideals and everything, but if you believe in God, that wasn't your destiny.
Right.
And you were being directed into some other, and it's up to you to look for the opportunities, you know, that came with it.
Okay.
The other decision I made in life was to join accounting firms. If you're an accountant, you want to be a partner and all that.
Yeah.
You know, by the time that I qualified, you know, I could see, you know, the accountants who were in the line to become partners and the rest coming into IRS and SEPs. You know, Raf Tufor, Mr. Dom, you know, and the rest. So again, it helps you to focus a bit. That maybe something you are doing. And as I went into their offices and things, because we were in a small unit, you know, you had access to deputy commissioners and the rest, you know. So, so I just want to you know, by way of mentorship, tell young people that you may miss one dream, but there are opportunities, other opportunities that come with everywhere you find yourself in life, and you just have to look out for it, work hard at it,
and grab it.
And
So you said you were a chorister.
Yes, I was a chorister up to. Well, I sang in the university choir, but the voice kept going and going. You can see from that I have to drink water. You know, but also when I became very active.
Which part did you sing? Tenor?
Very young. No, very young. I sang, you know, alto.
Okay.
But then I went to a boys' school. So with such a voice, you sang treble. So you started mixing.
Okay.
You know, then you come to the choir and you are singing alto.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so I was in the choir, but I have fond memories. Once I started going to secondary school and whatever, then we became more active in the National Union of Presbyterian Students and then the YPG, and that took on a life of its own. Okay. Yes, until I became a national executive and all that. Yes.
Oh, once a chorister, always a chorister, right?
I don't think you're pushing me to sing, no.
We'll get there, but let's talk about you, your days as finance minister. I mean, this is quite a sensitive position. You deal with all the money. When things go right, people will sing praises. When things go wrong, they will come lambasting you. How was the experience like? How did you handle the pressure?
Before I left for the fund, I worked with Dr. Bocho, I worked with Honorable Pepra, and I worked with all this array of deputy ministers, you know, at various points. And even at the fund, the one thing we had in common, at the fund actually, I'd known senior minister, Osafo Mafo. You know, they played early roles as a banker, you know, with his brother in the PNDC. So I knew some of them. I knew others like Alam, who was Empretech, and you know, and others. So we worked around ministers, and we saw. So I saw the tension. You know, when the revenues are not coming, and yeah, you saw, you know, when something goes well in cabinets, yeah, you see smiles when it doesn't go too well. You know, yeah, you take on a lot. But also apart from that, you know, I guess working at the fund, because I was fiscal affairs, we met ministers or deputy ministers on every mission. You know, countries accord that respect to the fund. You know, so if the minister is not in, invariably the minister will change. But otherwise, a deputy will be around. Yeah, so you saw, you know, ministers, you know, so you were on the taking end, then you go and you are on the giving end. Right. So you see, you know, both perspectives of how this thing plays. And I was fortunate as deputy minister and minister, having some of the same people I knew at the fund coming in with missions. The fund is known for austerity, but the technical assistance is often less known. So there's hardly any tax reform, there's hardly any public financial management reform, there's hardly any banking reform in which the fund is not involved. And that's the technical assistance department in which the World Bank is not involved.
Right.
So they have that, expertise. So fast forward, becoming a deputy minister, and I think it was so good I was a deputy minister first, and at the time, Dr. Dufo was not a minister. My colleague Fifi was not a minister. And I was not an MP. We were not MPs.
Yeah.
And I was not
An
MP.
So.
I was given the responsibility of taking care of Parliament.
Okay.
So I worked with the leadership of Parliament as a deputy, from PRMA to budget bureaus. When Dr. Dufo is available, he comes, and my colleague would also come in. So you got to see the array, of particularly the executive and Parliament, and of course budget time, and other times would be the judiciary. So I guess I had played the public financial management, budget role almost all my life, tax reforms, both at the Ministry of Finance, and so it helped. In short, what I'm trying to say is it helps.
Yeah.
Unlike maybe being thrust into the responsibility, without that kind of background, and so you could see they would put together the homegrown policy and other things, which were the experiences from other places we wanted to apply to Ghana. Yes, and I had a good leader.
Okay.
I had a good boss, a listening boss.
Okay. Having been there before, do you sometimes feel for the current finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, for all that he's going through?
Of course he would. He would, yes. Because he's doing much the same work, that you did. So you may have your differences in terms of the pressures. It's the same pressures, as you said, sometimes from colleagues inside and the rest. So you understand. Feeling is something else, but you do understand. What the situation is. But we also did not come before HIPIC. We've never come to this point, where we've defaulted, despite all the hiccups, that we had. And so I would think that something definitely went amiss. Some of us have written about it. Could we have been in this place? I mean, we are here already. Some of us have written about our opinions on how some things were being done. But we are where we are, and the country must get out of this as quickly as possible.
What would you have done if you were in his shoes?
What did we do? For the initiatives, like we are going to continue with the sinking fund. Remember, crude oil prices fell from $99 we used to prepare the budget to about $30, $35 in 2015 and 2016. They recovered only in 2017. But we were steadfast that we don't want to face, and that was a test of the crisis and the use of the petrol revenues. Luckily, we built the buffers when crude oil prices were very high, above with one oil field. So the difference for me is that with three oil fields, particularly before 2019, there was no way in which we couldn't have prepared better. If we had $250 million from one oil field with less output, with a medium range output, and we have three, oil fields, we could have been better. Let me put it simply. Could we have done more? Yes, if we tripled it, that's $750 million. And if we had built it, we built ours in 2 years before the oil prices crashed. So again, in that 2 years, and with the buffers that we left, we could have built, stronger, protection for the economy, right? And not blame everything on, COVID or Ukraine. Yes.
Let me ask you this. You've admitted that there were pressures, there were challenges with that seat called finance minister. How did you manage your own challenges?
Work harder.
There's that.
To respect the public servants. The Ministry of Finance has, and I'm not saying this because I was an employee there, but you have people who have, when you talk about 17 programs, by the time people get to the director levels and the chief director level, they may have handled, the current crop of directors may have handled, been part of 4 or 5 of these programs in their career. You know, and the earlier ones, you know, some of them like Sokwafari and the rest, who is our Minister of Health. You know, we started at the same time with them, and they're still, so there's a lot of experience, immense and others. So listening to them, and they're economists in their own right.
Yeah.
You know, they're accountants, the controller and others, some of them were, you know, so you have that technical, you know, backup, and I think, you know, listening to them, because they have been through thick or thin.
Yeah.
You know, as we're getting closer, so we made sure when I was in office that Monday morning directors meetings was taken seriously. Yeah. And then every, you know, once every month in that weekly meetings, we got a director to make a technical presentation, you know, so that you don't have silos. You know, what is it that you are doing, what is its impact on other directorates in the ministry. And then thanks to, again, a late, you know, Emisata, who had been a governor, and I was, as a deputy a governor of the central bank, so we worked closely before he became vice president. Okay. And with below the EMT, Economic Management Team, there's another body called the Economic Policy Coordination Committee, which brings together, you know, directors or chief directors of the Ministry of Finance, Statistical Service, NDPC, you know, Bank of Ghana, you know, governance and whatever. Right. And as deputy, I used to, you know, the minister chairs that, and that's technical. Okay. Right? It's not like EMT or cabinet where you have EMT also, because you have, you know, eminent people who have been in various positions from various sectors, and then the sectors also came. So when you have rigorous discussions, and that's where you synthesize a lot of, you know, what is going, you know, on with the economy. So the statistician is telling you, bringing his perspective, the planning people, and you know, so that's another effective tool that we have. You know, so in short, what I'm saying, the challenges are there, but the support is there. You have development partners. Remember, I spoke about technical assistance. You know, they come and, you know, they are sitting behind, like the mission staff for the fund at both the bank and the fund. Their offices here. You know, you are going under so many tensions and whatever, but they are back and looking at what's going on. So in one meeting, 2 meetings, or 2-week mission, they can tell you a lot. Yeah. You know, so you take the staff, you take the Article 4. Yeah. 2020, you know, I use it a lot. 2019, 2021. It tells us everything about what is going wrong. Right. And we have to just take them, you know, those documents seriously. We are taking some of them seriously. Would we have these challenges? Yes, maybe with COVID and all that, but maybe we could have beaten them. And also, if you consider that this is the only crisis where we had the most money to manage it. 6 billion, you add our own 2 billion, sovereign bond and others, 3 oil fields. Yeah, there was enough money. Considering that every program that we did, you know, you barely got a billion. Some were just 550, some are 850 million. But we're talking billions of US dollars. So something really, I think that one day we should be able to sit back and see fundamentally what is it that went wrong. You know, not just to the problems that confronted us, but to the flows and how we probably channel them and see it so that, you know, in future, we may not get that for a long time, but yes, we're going to get 3 billion. We can, you know, allocate them, you know, better.
Whilst the finance minister, was there ever a time that you were so down that you ever regretted becoming a politician, asking yourself, I mean, how did I even get myself here?
I guess that's life, right? A friend of mine says I get to a point where even billionaires and millionaires ask themselves, why did I become a millionaire? And I'm sure we have the extended family, right? So sometimes you may ask yourself, why am I the only person who has reached this level, and everybody thinks, you know, they look up to you, but they also look to you for. So yes, you have those moments. Did I regret? At certain points, you may be down, or you will be down. You know, you remember the Terkper syndrome, and you know that kind of things and all that. And when you are driving home a point, But see, the thing I have come to appreciate is that, one, you are in cabinet with colleagues, where there's a sitting order, but there are as much cabinet ministers as yourself. Two, they have an agenda to deliver roads, to deliver inputs for agri, to deliver, and you are the one to provide the resources.
Definitely.
And yes, they may appreciate that revenues are down and whatever, but that's why your Minister of Finance bring the revenue.
They don't care how you do it.
That's all they care, but you know. But remember, they're also under pressure from constituents, and the president's under pressure. And, you know, yes, so I guess the pressure goes round.
It goes round. Yours is hotter than theirs.
Oh well, yes. As it goes round, it stays longer at your desk, and then it moves on. Remember, it's going to ultimately move to your right, and the vice is sitting there.
Sometimes they can even make excuses, and push everything on you. Finance Ministry hasn't released funds to us, and that's why we are not performing. Yeah,
which is, which in many instances is true. When I was at the fund, ministers of finance said that, well, whatever is wrong, we blame it on IMF. IMF says we should do austerity. IMF says we should do this. So,
right.
And I remember the other one was very profound. I was, after the VAT was cancelled, I was really down. Maybe you asked me about, because that was my biggest challenge. And when you are young, you think, the sky is the limit and everything. You're doing everything right, and it hits you, real hard, and you face such a challenge. So he had then become running mates. And so we're having a conversation, and I said, I'm contemplating, once again. And then he looked at me profoundly and said, the VAT, he believes, will be introduced. Yeah. And that was when the fund approached me first. So he said, but there's something like not walking back on your country. When it meets you.
Emotional blackmail. He blackmailed you with that.
Well, no, I think he's a sincere man.
Yes.
He's a sincere man. Maybe he saw something
Yes.
And so I wasn't surprised when he stood, really behind me as vice president. I remember the very first relaunch at Akosomo,
right?
Which is where I met Mr. PNM, and he also became.
Okay.
I have all these, elderly people.
Right.
Nana Yemasa, who was deputy minister and central bank deputy governor already. So, I had all these, people
supporting.
From my days, who would call and find out how things are going. And so, so you don't have that. So he could see he was very passionate in making sure that this thing succeeded, and then we succeeded.
And it's quite interesting. So when you retire from a hard day's work into your corner, what do you do to relax?
Sometimes I do more research.
More research? But you need to rest.
No, I sometimes switch to specific TV or radio programs. Well, not the entertainment type, maybe to disappoint you. I watch.
I know, right?
Bloomberg and others, to see what's going on. They have a bit of their funny side, in all these things. Weekends I do some hiking. I like to, to go up, Peduase, the mountains.
Okay. Do I get the opportunity to come with you this
weekend? I encourage everybody to come. You see, the thing about Peduase is that the crowd is a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody is moving at his or her pace.
Okay.
You have those who are riding and climbing. You have sportsmen who are using it. You have soldiers sometimes with their haversack behind them and moving at very fast pace. You have elderly people who go at their own pace. You have people who go midway. Nobody asks you a question.
Yeah.
You can't make it. Some take you know, in starting, they take vehicles up, then they start down first, and you know.
And sometimes you're motivated by, I mean, seeing other people.
Other people, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's motivation.
And I move fast. You know.
You do.
I relatively.
I must
you know,
up my game if I want to walk with you. But I see that
you get some selfie requests as well.
And how do you handle that?
Oh, you oblige. You know, you don't want to discourage the young. You don't want to, you don't want to encourage. It's usually from the young people.
Yeah, you look very healthy, and that explains the walk. I mean, going to Pejasi is not an easy thing.
And I played course, and then I did some school sports.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
Yes.
While in school, you did some sports?
I did some sports, but for example, I played. Yeah, I played football, but you know, at Tech, that was when I spoke about Acotex. That's when you had whole mighty Eagles. You know, and you'll be surprised that like one Bochwe, and they were either from Mauli or from Hotek.
Okay.
So these were people who were playing, you know, now Division 1 already, and in the school team, we had Hotek, we had about, you know, 5 or 7. There were some Gun boys, Bochwe, and others who.
Okay.
So your course didn't go far.
I see.
But soon when you.
Okay.
Yeah, but I was part of the team.
Oh wow! But now you don't play football anymore.
No, I don't. You know, I wish I had learned to play tennis, because that one is, you know, you need 22 or maybe even 5 to play soccer.
It's not late. You can still try it if you want. You know that. Or you don't have the time.
Well, you know, even I don't think even Honorable Haruna, you know, convinces me to do that. You know. When I visit him, Tamale, you have to wait. You go in the morning, he's playing soccer with us.
Okay. Oh, but you can still play. I mean, it's not late.
Yes, there are teams. There are teams where, you know, middle age, you know, they play, but the fun, walk is fine.
Yeah,
I also do some biking.
That works for you now.
Yeah.
But I know you also listen to music.
Yes, I do gospel.
Which is your favorite?
You know, the thing about gospel music is that, you know, there are hymns for every occasion.
Yeah.
For praise, for,
When you're excited,
challenges, when you're excited.
You are down.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So, so you sing to praise God. Ebenezer.
Okay. You should be able to sing alto. The alto part.
That was some minutes. You know, so it's used for epic occasions.
Okay.
You know, sometimes say funeral, sometimes, you know, the words fit, you know, many.
The lyrics.
Yeah, the lyrics are, you know, yes. And of course you have the Christian gospels, you know, and the rest, country gospel, and a variety, so I just.
Okay. So
and then of course there's our camp praise.
Thank you so much, Mr. Seth Terkper. We've been admiring you from afar, and I want to say we appreciate your good work. Keep up the good work. Viewers, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you very much.
My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Same time next week, I'll be bringing you another captivating edition of PM Personality Profile. Do enjoy the rest of our programs.
Yeah, I encourage more Ghanaians, you know, to take part in this exercise. The thing about pediatrics is that there are different ages, you know, different, you know, physiques, and you don't have to come all the way up. You know, nobody would, you know, penalize you, laugh at you or anything. Gradually, you can start at your points, and then you get, you know, to this. And you go at your pace, you know.
I'm almost there. Guys, I made it! I'm at Pejasi. Woo! I'm so happy with myself. Terkper.
So this is the routine.
Thank you so much for doing this with us. I had fun. It was difficult climbing,
yeah,
but I'm happy I made it. This is me,
there were a few people from your office who
were climbing as well.
Yes.
Okay,
I don't see some of them. They have been traveling. So.
Yes, they do. Yes. They do. Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you so much.
Yes.
It was nice walking with you. Do enjoy the rest of our programs.